Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are diving deep into something that's becoming absolutely critical: securing our AI systems. Companies are pouring millions into building these incredible AI models. But what happens when a single, tiny vulnerability gets overlooked? Well, it can lead to a complete disaster. So, we're going to explore how specialized penetration testing is moving from a nice to have to a must have, turning those weak spots into a rock solid defense. Okay, before we jump in, a quick but important note. This is part 5 of a 5-part tutorial from Virtualization Options LLC, and it's for educational purposes only. I really recommend that you check out the detailed PDF course document. It has way more detail than we could ever hope to cover in this briefing. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to talk about why testing AI isn't really optional anymore. Then, we'll put on our black hats and look at things from an attacker's point of view. After that, we'll flip the script and talk defense, how to build a real AI fortress. And finally, we'll look at the big picture, the long game, and wrap up with the most important lessons. All right, let's get right into it. Why is this such a big deal right now? Well, it's simple. The more we weave AI into the very core of our businesses, the bigger a target it becomes. And this is the question you have to ask yourself. So many organizations have their traditional security locked down tight, but they completely forget about the AI model itself. And that creates this massive blind spot, what we call the AI security gap. Because your old school testing tools, they just can't see the brand new, unique ways these models can be broken. And hey, if the risk of getting hacked isn't enough to grab your attention, maybe this will. The regulators are here. From GDPR to the EU AI Act to HIPAA for healthcare, new laws are popping up that make this kind of specialized AI security testing a legal requirement. It's not just a good idea anymore, it's the law. So, how do we actually find these weak spots? Well, you know the old saying, to catch a thief, you've got to think like one. So, let's shift our perspective for a minute and walk through the playbook that attackers and testers use to crack these AI systems wide open. Now, testers usually have 2 main approaches. You've got black box testing, which is like being an attacker on the outside. You have no inside info, you just poke and prod at what's publicly available. Then there's white box testing. That's the total opposite. It's like an internal audit where you have the keys to the kingdom, full access to the code, the data, everything. It lets you go so much deeper. And believe me, the stakes are sky high. Just look at this quote from a CTO. It really drives home how incredibly valuable this is. And it's the perfect lead-in to a real-world story about a test that stopped an absolute catastrophe before it happened. You're gonna love this case study because the vulnerability, it was almost laughably simple. A SaaS company builds this amazing, groundbreaking language model, but their API, the front door to their system, was missing one tiny thing: a rate limit. And that one little oversight left their crown jewels completely exposed. With no limits, the testers could just go to town. They hammered that API with an automated script, firing off over 347,000 queries in a super short time. Each query was like asking a tiny question. And by piecing the answers together, they started to map out exactly how the model worked. And this is the devastating result. Using all that data they pulled, the testers actually trained their own shadow model. Think of it like a perfect clone. It mimicked the original model's behavior with an incredible 89% fidelity. They literally stole the entire model without ever seeing a single line of code. So what's the bottom line? What's the real damage? The value of that intellectual property they basically just walked out the door with was estimated at $7.1 million. All of that, gone, because of one missing rate limit. This is exactly the kind of nightmare scenario that AI pen testing is meant to prevent. Okay, we've seen how easy it can be to attack. Now for the fun part, defense. How do we build an AI system that's not just smart, but tough as nails? How do we build that fortress? So your first line of defense actually starts way back, during the training phase. It's a concept called differential privacy. The best way to think about it is like adding a little bit of static to a song on the radio. You can still hear the melody, the overall patterns in the data, but you can't pick out any one specific instrument or voice. It adds just enough mathematical noise that it becomes impossible to link an output back to any single person's data. It's genius. Now, it's not totally free. There is a small trade-off. As you can see here, using differential privacy might mean your model's accuracy dips a little bit. maybe 3 to 5%. But you have to ask yourself, is that tiny dip worth it for a mathematically proven shield against these kinds of extraction attacks? For most, the answer is a resounding yes. But defense doesn't end there. Once the model is live, you need layers. Think of it like a medieval castle. First, you have the gatekeeper, analyzing every query that comes in, looking for anything suspicious. Then, as the data leaves, you sanitize the output, scrubbing any sensitive info. And finally, you have sentinels on walls, constantly monitoring traffic to spot those coordinated, sneaky attacks in real time. And hey, remember that case study? It proves that just counting queries isn't going to cut it anymore. Modern rate limiting has to be way smarter. It needs to look at limits across whole groups of accounts to stop those distributed attacks, and even watch for queries that look like they're trying to systematically map out what your model knows. Look, securing your AI isn't something you do once and then check a box. It's not a one-and-done fix. It has to be a continuous process, something that's woven right into the very fabric of how you build and operate software. This timeline really shows you what that looks like. It has to be part of the whole journey. You're testing for issues during training, you're automating scans during development, you're doing full-blown pen tests before you go live, and then in production, you're using continuous monitoring and even red teaming, where you literally pay ethical hackers to try and break your stuff 24/7. Security has to be everywhere, all the time. And the payoff? It's just staggering. A financial firm that really invested in this proactive approach saw a return on their security spending of between 600 and 1,100 times. Let that sink in. By preventing just one major breach, they saved themselves from hundreds of millions in fines, losses, and brand damage. So let's bring it all home. What are the big takeaways here? What do you, whether you're building these systems or testing them, really need to remember? Okay, lesson number 1. The threat landscape is huge and it's weird. It's not just about someone trying to steal your data directly. Attackers can poison your data before you even train your model, or they can use clever tricks called prompt injection to make your live model ignore its own safety rules. You have to be ready for all of it. And the second key lesson is this: there is no silver bullet. You can't just buy one tool or flip one switch and be safe. Security has to be layered. Any single control can and probably will fail. Real strength, real resilience comes from having defenses during training, defenses at the front door API, and defenses watching everything at runtime. It's defense in depth, but for the age of AI. And that really brings us to the final question, doesn't it? The price of doing nothing is, well, it's catastrophic. We're talking multi-million-dollar fines, losing the intellectual property that makes your company unique, and shattering the trust you have with your customers. So the final question is pretty simple. Can your organization really afford not to act?